myself. I'm a GP here on the Sunshine Coast. I've been here since 2001, the first time that I came. It was to do some locum in the emergency department at the Noosa Hospital. And then, I came to Australia in 1999 after spending 4 years in the UK doing all sort of different specialties, mainly surgical specialties, after studying my medical school in Spain. Then I came to Australia for a year, and then now it's been 26. So first I came to do 1 year of emergency medicine to have experience as a surgeon. I was going to train as an ENT surgeon. So it's very important what you actually talked about, because I'm going to show a couple of pictures about that. My last year in the UK, I was just removing tonsils and adenoids and things like that. And now I realized that was a big mistake. But anyway, that's just a side note. Then I did 6 years of emergency medicine, including intensive care. And then I went through, or by accident, one of the local GPs said to me, he met me in the emergency department and said, why don't you come and work with us and do some general practice? I felt like, oh, it sounds a bit boring, but I'll give it a go. Anyway, it felt like it was a holiday after doing 6 years of emergency medicine. Then I started practicing just as a GP, normal GP, following all the guidelines and everything. But one of the things that I could see is that actually, from my clinical observation, is that those guidelines, some of them, they were actually wrong. And I wasn't getting my patients better. So I decided to basically start to look into doing some things differently to get a different outcome. And that it took me, again, by accident, through my partner, who's a child health nurse. Someone dropped a DVD from a doctor, a dentist called Weston Price. And Kathy, she started watching it at work, and then she brought it home and she said, you should have a look at this, because this is quite amazing. Anyway, I saw that, and I thought, like, this is just shocking. This is starting to make a lot of sense of why people are sick. So it got me into this sort of looking a bit differently in the last 18 years. I've been a doctor now for 30, so I've seen a lot of sick people. But it showed me that it was the aha moment to basically decide, hold on a second, I think we're missing a lot that we haven't been taught at medical school. So anyway, that's the little introduction. So that's one of the photographs from this book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Dr. Weston Price, who was an American doctor, an American dentist back in the 1930s. And he looked at all different traditional cultures around the world. And he was seeing that they have perfect teeth, beautiful cheekbones, jaw lines, exactly what Mike was talking about. They didn't have any dental cavities. And despite of all these traditional cultures eating very different foods, they have perfect physical, also mental health. And that's one of the things that it's very unfortunate, particularly here in Australia. I'm originally from Spain, but my first year I spent 18 months in the Northern Territory in Darwin. And I went to some of the communities, and to my shock, it was that we had the highest suicide rate in Aboriginal people in the world, particularly in the Tiwi Islands, by hanging. And that was just shocking. Because these people, Weston Price went around the world and actually visited Aboriginal people, and they looked like pretty healthy people and happy people. And unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. But anyway, that's just a little thing. Those were the structures that Mike was talking about. Beautiful cheekbones, perfect teeth. That doesn't exist anymore nowadays. every single kid is needing bracing. And what it was shocking, and this is what it made me think a lot, it was how from one generation to the next of these people changing their diet, we got what we're getting now. And exactly that. That was in one generation. So the genes don't change in one generation. From having perfect teeth, and you could say, oh, this guy just only picked up some skeletons, for instance, or some people who were looking really healthy. Well, he went out and had a look at the skeletons, all the skeletons. He couldn't find those deformities. So how do you explain that? That's what it got me into nutrition and environmental medicine. So these people not only started getting the deformities and problems with breathing, for instance, and then having enlarged adenoids and tonsils and not being able to breathe, and as an ENT surgeon that I was going to become, these people, they would need to have them removed, in theory, so they could actually breathe through the nose. But I think if we start working before this happens, we will resolve a lot of issues. What Mike said about the parasympathetic and sympathetic, if you breathe through your mouth, you're actually in a sympathetic mode. So you will never relax. And if you're under constant chronic stress and you're breathing through your mouth, you're going to get sick. And eventually you're going to get depressed. So anyway, from that to basically that in one generation, I thought it was just unbelievable. So that's the different bones that you can see how thick the bones used to be, and then suddenly the bone becomes thin in one generation. So that is not genetics, okay? And how that actually was a hole in a bone, how the bone actually can heal by itself. Not only heal, it actually regenerates. And I'll talk a little bit about the biophysics of that, how it happens. And that's a book that it made me change how I look into things. It's actually free on the internet. You can get a PDF file and it's free. And when you have a look at all the different pictures, it's just incredible because every single traditional culture had the same changes despite of having very different diets. Anyway, that is something that I started looking into 18 years ago and how important nutrition was. And I've seen amazing changes in nutrition. But for the last year and a bit, I've been learning a little bit about biophysics. Now, Brian said to me, oh, do you want to come and talk in our heart summit? And then I thought like, okay, yeah, I'll come and talk about, the heart and how bad cholesterol is and gives you heart attacks, and you shouldn't eat red meat because it gives you cancer, right? No? Anyway, that was just a little introduction so you understand where I'm coming from. So from a very orthodox medical career to suddenly start looking more into what is happening and how things are changing so quickly. So it's not particularly that I wanted to come here and put myself into a willingness out of comfort zone, because I think it always is, but I believe that's the only way you actually grow as a person, putting willingly yourself out of your comfort zone, and that's how you achieve things in life anyway. So today, to bring a little bit of provoking thoughts, and it was a heart summit, I wanted to talk about how the heart is actually not a pump. And then you think like, what? Well, we've been told the heart is a pump. It's got a left side, a right side. It's a circuit. It goes through basically the heart, the left heart. It starts pumping blood to the body. goes through the arteries, smaller arteries, eventually to the capillaries. There is an exchange of nutrients and oxygen into the tissues. Then it goes into the veins. Then it goes back to the right heart. From the right heart, it goes into the lungs, gets oxygenated, and then again, right? So if the heart can do that, right, and it's the pump moving that blood, I would say to you, how it comes that it's moving around 7,200 liters a day, that little pump, right? How can do that? And how can basically push blood through 100,000 kilometer pipe? That's the length of all the capillaries that you would have in your body. So how is that possible that that little pump can do that? I feel like, what's that?
Is it high blood pressure?
Well, actually, high blood pressure is a mechanism of compensation to the flow. And I'll explain to you about this, how it actually works. So it is mechanically, it's impossible for the heart to pump all that blood. The blood has a viscosity 5 times that of water. So, and then to put it through such a length of different capillaries, it's impossible. So what it actually makes the blood flow through the capillaries and the blood vessels? Well, this is where these two things are coming. Has anyone heard about these things? Yep. So zeta potential is basically cells get a negative charge. This is going now into biophysics, and this is what I've been learning. I mean, you do biophysics in the first year of medical school for a few months, and then it goes all out of it. Yeah, anyway, you forget it. But so cells get a negative charge around them. And when you have two magnets with the same pole and you put two cells or two magnets trying to approach each other, they're going to repel. Yeah? So because it's negative and negative, they repel each other. So that makes or helps to prevent blood clots. That's one thing. So unfortunately, there's a lot of people getting blood clots. And I have treated a lot of them as a general practitioner and in emergency, because blood clots can come from the leg and then they end up in the lung and it can kill you. So, or strokes or whatever. And then the other important part is called exclusion zone water. Now, has anyone heard of the fourth phase of water? There's a guy called Gerald Pollack, and he has described that water has 4 phases. One is liquid, the other one is solid, like ice, the other one is gas, like a steam, and there's a 4th phase of water that is actually gel, or easy water, or structured water. So what is that? Well, our body are made of water, while you cannot get your finger and just poke it and go through it if it's just water, right? So what happens is when you put a hydrophilic, that means that attracts water, surface in water, there is a organization of charges around that hydrophilic surface, let's say that, where negative charges are created around it and then separate the positive charges. So it's almost like a battery. If you do that with a pipe, and our blood vessels are pipes, and they are made of proteins which are hydrophilic, that creates a negative charge in the wall of the pipe, closer to the wall, and in the middle, a positive charge. Well, that actually, when you put that in water, it will create a flow with nothing. So how does that work? That's nature. That's nature. That's how it works. So you start getting movement, a flow inside of the pipe. Where is that energy coming from, right? So that, together with that, is one of the things that it makes the blood flow, and it helps the heart. So what is obvious is that when the heart, in theory, pumps, the blood comes out at a great velocity, but when it's starting to get to the capillaries, the flow actually stops. So how from the capillaries gets back to the heart if the blood has a stop? What is pushing the blood back to the heart? Anyone? Energy. Well, exactly, but this is energy. So it's actually flowing back to the heart. It starts to slow back from the capillaries, and it starts getting almost back to the same velocity, entering the heart again. We're not taught that at medical school. And this is incredible, because what are the things that actually will make the zeta potential and the easy water to get bigger? I mean, like creating more negative charge. Does anyone know? Well, a higher pH, more alkaline, actually improves that. That's one of the things. But what is the other thing? Does it have anything to do with the charge of the Earth? Exactly. So the Earth is charged negatively. The ionosphere, when you go up high in the sky, is positive. Well, yeah, but if you're in a skyscraper, and for people, I mean, very rich people, that they have their penthouse in the top floor, that is actually bad, because their basically zeta potential will be less, because they're getting more positive electrons or positive protons or ions from the atmosphere, and they're further away from the Earth. Now, the Earth is negatively charged. This is why we get lightning. You get a positive charge up in the sky with a negative charge on the Earth, and then you get boom. It's like when you get a battery and then you put the two cables together, you get a spark, right? So what has happened in the last, I don't know, I would say even less than 100 years, is that we have been disconnected from the Earth through rubber soles. So I would strongly recommend all of you to, one, either start walking barefoot, two, wear leather soles. Why? Because leather grounds you. So you're getting negative electrons through you. The more negative you are, the healthier you are. When you lose that negative charge and you get more positive charge, you get sick. And you will lose that zeta potential, then you start getting clotting and clumping of red cells, creating clots, for instance, and so on. So that is something that I've been learning about in the last year and a half. Another very, very important thing that improves that is, do you know what? Breath, well, through respiration, that you can do it because you're going to modify the pH as you breathe. But we got it out there. So sunlight, particularly red light and infrared light, improves that. How is that? As a GP, here on the Sunshine Coast, you don't know how many people I see with vitamin D deficiency. How? It's very, very common. And I mean, the reference range is up to 15 nanomoles per liter. That's the very lowest. And they said, oh, if it's less than that, it's no If it's more than that, it's no deficiency. I think optimally will be something like in the range of 120. So I used to supplement vitamin D with other liposoluble vitamins. I don't anymore. You know why? Does anyone know why I don't do that? Well, false reading, it could be, but one of the things that if I give you a tablet that is going to change that number, right, it's going to stop from me knowing if that person is actually getting enough sunlight. And that is a problem. Because do you think you're going to get the energy, the same energy from a supplement of vitamin D as to the energy from the sun? So I've taken all my patients from vitamin D, all of them. And I used to supplement the vitamin D, never given with calcium because, there's no problem with calcium normally. Calcium is very common in the ground. And when you see people with osteopenia or osteoporosis, and you do an X-ray, you can see that the calcium is not in the bones, but it's everywhere else. Calcified arteries and in the soft tissue around the joints, all the osteophytes. And then you feel like, well, it's not a problem of calcium deficiency, is it? There's excess calcium, but the calcium is not going to the bones. So why is that? Why is it not going to the bones? And then we kind of start talking about what we've seen with those photographs of those beautiful people, that they all used to look like models, basically, about liposoluble vitamins, which are the fatty vitamins, that interestingly enough, a lot of those vitamins come from the sun. And you feel like, what? Well, when the sun is strong, what happens to the grass? It grows. And when animals eat that grass, that fast-growing grass, you're actually getting that energy from that grass and putting it into liposoluble vitamins, which will create the beautiful egg yolks or beautiful fat that is more yellow in the meat that we eat or in butter. So, and those things that become, for instance, yellow are high in vitamin K2. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of vitamin K2, because it helps to remove calcium from soft tissue and putting it back into the bone. And then you feel like, okay, hold on a second. So what is happening? You don't create and you don't destroy energy, you transform energy. So we are transforming the energy from the sun into us. And one of the things that you might find interesting is we're doing the reverse process to plants, animals. How does that work? Well, to give you an example, we have hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the red pigment in the red cells. Do you know that that has the same chemical structure like chlorophyll? Do you know that? The only difference is hemoglobin has an iron atom, chlorophyll has a magnesium atom. Everyone knows photosynthesis, how plants get the energy from the sun and then the plant grows and creates carbohydrates, basically. So we do the reverse process. Chlorophyll attracts sunlight, hemoglobin does the same thing. So what the heme group does, it's almost like a little solar panel. We know a lot of people have heard about the mitochondria, which in theory is what generates energy in the cell for the cell to work and maintain, for instance, the DNA structure so you don't get cancer and so on. Well, you improve energy transformation in the mitochondria through light, through chromophores. And then if you start getting, it might be a little bit technical into, aerobic respiration, and then the Krebs cycle, and then the TCA cycle. At the end of the day, what you're getting is electrons for the mitochondria to transform that energy. And light, natural light improves that. Grounding improves that. And then what it makes it worse, Okay, well, if you're wearing rubber soles and you don't get sunlight, that's going to be bad. But also it's EMFs, non-native EMF, electromagnetic fields. Everyone is, inside of a house, behind glass, not getting natural light, or they go to work, they're sitting in front of a computer, getting radiated by blue light, which, by the way, increases your cortisol levels. You increase cortisol, it will increase your sugar levels, so it makes you diabetic. That's just the screen and LED lights and so on. I mean, the all incandescent lights were better because you were still getting some red light and infrared. That's why they're hot. But anyway, that is just, so you can understand how that energy flows from one thing to another. But I see it. I see people with vitamin D deficiency. So that it tells me that they're not getting out. This is why we have to be as much as possible out there. I'm not saying that you have to be in direct light. When your skin feels that the sunlight is too strong, that is the signal for your body to say, okay, this is too much, I need to go in the shade, which is what animals do. But when you're outside and you're in the shade, you're actually getting energy still from infrared light. So when we are exposed to all those things and you stop the flow, what is the reaction of the body to actually help with the flow? It's what you say, Brian, hypertension. The body naturally is going to try to reduce the diameter of the blood vessels to actually increase the flow if we have to stop the flow because we're not doing the natural thing. So blood pressure starts going up. And then what do we do as GPs? Give blood pressure tablets. Because we don't know, it's in the family and we don't know why it happens. I can tell you one thing, those people that didn't have high blood pressure, those people didn't have dementia, those people that didn't have heart disease. So a lot to think about. Anyway, another thing that I just recently found out, when we look at the heart, and that's why I still didn't know that it was what the acronym was for Heart Summit, but I thought okay, I'll talk about the heart. The heart has almost like the shape of a rugby ball, right? And that rugby ball, if you cut it through the middle, it has a spiral shape. And that's the shape that I want to show you. Well, that's the golden ratio that we get in nature on everything, on plants, we have the same golden ratio. I have to say this. It was a Spanish cardiologist that apparently was doing medical school at the University of Salamanca, where my father was from. And his name was Torrent Wasp. And he described this saying, the heart is like a muscular band that has been rotated like a rope and created that. And how amazing is that you get the funny looking, well, not funny looking, the beautiful, golden ratio. And that's what we get when people look like models, like those people. You had that golden ratio. Leonardo da Vinci actually, with the Vitruvius Man, did all the proportions, how the beautiful proportions should look in someone. And that's how traditional people used to look. Nowadays, we just don't tend to see it. So I thought it was just interesting. So if the heart cannot pump all that blood through 100,000 kilometers, because it's impossible, and so the heart, I think, needs a little bit of help through basically what we have spoken before to be able to do that. And I just find that amazing. It's incredible. Now, the heart has the highest concentration of mitochondria in the body, more than the brain. right? So, and the mitochondria is what transforms energy in the cell. That's why it can be, pumping all day long for I don't know how many years. So I thought that it was very interesting, but then when you say to someone, I love you from all my heart, how it comes from there, and you don't say, I love you from all my brain, right? It's something very interesting. So when you lose energy, things get bigger. Apparently that's what happens in galaxies and things like that. And also when you get, for instance, heart failure, the heart gets bigger. So the mitochondria is not efficient in transforming that energy that we might be getting from electrons, from good nutrition, from sunlight, for whatever reason. Now we know that the heart is something like 60 times more electric than the brain. And it's something like 5,000 times more magnetic than the brain. So this is electromagnetism. This is incredible. Now, when you get an electric cable and you go positive and negative, you create an electromagnetic field around that cable. We're exposed to these things that we haven't evolved for millions of years. So if we're electrical, because we are, and that's what we do, for instance, when we do an ECG, we check the electrical activity in the heart. Do you think that all these things that we're exposed to with these non-native electromagnetic fields that we haven't evolved for millions of years, they're not doing anything? I mean, I'm just making, or trying to make people think. Do you think that they actually teach us that at medical school? Despite of knowing that the heart is electric. I mean, we do an ECG, we do an EEG of the brain. It's electric. But we shock people, to put them back into rhythm. Why we're not taught that? Anyway. But a very, very interesting thing as well is the heart looks like that, but guess what it does with the flow that it goes through the left ventricle? It creates the vortex. So how incredible is in nature that you keep getting back to that? I would say that's the shape of energy. How do you explain that? So do you think the moon or the planets or they have anything to do, or the magnetic field of the earth, on our physiology, how the body works? And then when we get surrounded by all these artificial things, it's not going to have an impact? So my advice is the more you get into nature, the healthier you will be. So if you try to mimic a wild animal, how they live, because I get patients, I said, oh yeah, but doc, how long should I, for instance, do grounding? Is it 10 minutes enough in the morning? And I said to them, well, just look at a wild animal. How long are they grounding for? How long they are earthing for? They are touching the earth, getting negative electrons. It's all day long. And you're asking me 10 minutes is going to be enough? So, how much sunlight should I get? And I said to them, look, the sun is something that, depending on our ancestry, where we came from, which latitude we get, we will have different colors of skin. So the darker you are, the closer ancestrally you're coming closer to the equator. When you look at a map and the original people closer to the equator, they're all black. And then the further away from the equator, you get paler and paler. So depending on your ancestry, you will have a type of a skin for that type of sun. But now we started traveling all around the world, and then you get to Australia, a lot of Celtic background, and then people that were frying themselves. And then saying, well, the sun gives you cancer. Well, we have evolved with skin cancers for thousands of years, or hundreds of thousands of years. So what has happened? One of the things that are critical that I've been learning is that you need to expose yourself at sunrise while you're grounding, because that's going to prime your skin. It's almost like you have a natural sunscreen that it will protect you for when the sun is at 30-degree angle, that you start getting UV radiation, which is the one that it will age your skin and fry you. So if you're not getting that red morning light and you don't transition to that UV light, and then you said, oh, I'm gonna go and get the sun, and then you fry yourself because you got Fitzpatrick type skin 1 from, Norway or Scotland, then it's gonna be a problem. So anyway, just that is just to show you few little things that, again, it's going back to nature. Now, one of the things that, again, we used to do is, before modern transportation, is you were eating what you had around you at that latitude. You weren't getting kiwis from Italy in here, for instance, or whatever. So what I find very interesting is that people, they didn't have any problems, but that people had to eat what nature allowed to grow at the latitude where they were. And we have broken those rules. That's going to create a, if you want to call it, a quantum mismatch with your mitochondria, with that energy transformation. Because you're getting like a different, I don't know, I'm not very technical in physics, but different frequencies that are going to jam basically the little engines in the mitochondria for that energy transformation. And we've never done that before until just recently, that we could move around easily. So if you eat what it can grow around where you live, that is going to be the best thing that you're going to be able to do. So if nature doesn't allow it where you are, just don't do it. Don't eat it. It is very interesting, like when you start going from how, in a way, energetics work, the further away you are from the equator and the less light you get, water has more energy to compensate for the lack of energy of the sun. Has anyone heard of deuterium depleted water? So deuterium is a heavy hydrogen, and that heavy hydrogen will basically jam the mitochondria on that energy transformation. So when you are in the North Pole and there's no light, the water up there is highly energized to compensate for the lack of energy that there is at that latitude. When you get closer to the equator, you get less energy in the water because you got more energy from the sun. Now, when you're in the Arctic Circle, what Eskimos used to eat? Were there any plant foods? And I can tell you one thing, there was I cannot remember his name now, but there was a doctor who spent more than 20 years with traditional Eskimos. He didn't find one single case of cancer. And I can tell you one thing, Eskimos weren't eating vegetables. Why? Because nature didn't allow those vegetables to grow at that latitude. They were on animal foods. Now, maybe because you're into this regenerative agriculture and obviously you're not scared of eating animal foods, this is just my clinical observation. A lot of people suddenly they've gone into eating like a carnivore diet. Has anyone heard of the carnivore diet? And how for some people it's amazing because it reduces inflammation and they feel better and they feel more energized and so on. What they've done is, one, plant foods are high in deuterium, so on the heavy hydrogen. And that can jam your mitochondria. Now you feel like, well, so you're saying not to eat any plants? And I said, no, no, I love my vegetables too. But what happens is these people, when you start talking to them, you realize that they have created the light environment of the Arctic Circle in their house and at their work through artificial light, LED lights, which is excess blue light, which is what you get in the Arctic Circle. I mean, if you're sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours, you're getting excess blue light. And that will increase your cortisol. It will wreck your melatonin, which is a very potent antioxidant. It will raise your glucose levels, making you pre-diabetic. As a matter of fact, red light can decrease blood sugar levels by 30%. We're not talking about food. We're talking about light. So that is how important putting the physics or biophysics, how that affects the biochemistry, and then that has an effect, a biological effect in your body. So, I mean, I was a Nazi with food in the sense that I was, oh, you're eating this, or you're eating grains, or this, that, and now I realize that maybe I was wrong. And I keep evolving with what I see. So this is a very, very powerful thing that we need to try to understand. So that's why the carnivore diet works with some people, because they are matching the light environment with a diet of an Eskimo. They're getting the blue light excess that you would get in the Arctic Circle, and you're matching it with the food that you would eat in the Arctic Circle. That's why the inflammatory markers, you can see it in their blood test. Inflammatory markers, they come down, they feel better, they lose weight, and so on. You put weight on because you're losing energy. Everything in nature that gets big is because loses energy, from galaxies to heart failure. So that's how it explains. And it comes from the E equals mc squared. The bigger the mass, the more energy you need to move it, right? So that explains a lot of people why they're getting sick. And I think that's it for me.